Hi, I'm Michele. I'm a health coach and I'm producing a tribe of healthy, happy women. One of the ways that I do that is by showing women simple, healthy ways to prepare food in advance for the week. This is especially important for those women out there who are very busy, which is probably all of us. So anyway, the two recipes, or I should say food prep that I'm going to show you in the next couple of minutes. One is a recipe made with roasted corn, and it is actually a roasted corn and basil-shallot vinaigrette. And the second is just simple roasted beets. So for the first recipe, we're going to start with fresh corn. You can use frozen corn. However, you would have to thaw it, and fresh corn is always better. So while you can still get your hands on this, I would suggest that you go out and get yourself 3 ears of corn, or if you want to double the recipe, 6 ears of corn. I've already decobbed most of the corn here, but I just wanted to show you a simple, quick tip. I've flattened the ends to make cutting the corn easier, and I truly recommend, as far as kitchen prep, that every woman have a chef's knife in the kitchen. I did make an investment in this chef's knife for about $70, but it's extremely worth it. Well, one of the things that's most important when you're decobbing, or decorning, I should say, the cob, is to really to fold your fingers under so that you don't slice your fingers off. And then you can just take the cob and just go down as close to the cob as you can and just cut the corn right off. And you should only have to do that on each side, so that should be 4 cuts. Once you do that, you're just going to go ahead and put the corn that you've cut off the cob into a bowl, because you're going to mix it with 2 tablespoons of olive oil. That's all you're going to need to do to roast the corn. And I've measured the 2 tablespoons of olive oil here. And so I'm just going to go ahead and pour that into the bowl. Get myself a spoon and stir that around. You'll see to my right, I already have a cookie sheet, and what I've done is I've actually lined that with parchment paper. I use parchment paper when I bake cookies as well. It really helps with the food not sticking. And so I've gone ahead and tossed the corn in the olive oil, and I'll toss it around a little bit more on the sheet. But all you're going to do, as you can see, is pour the corn right onto the parchment paper. And you're going to roast this at 450 degrees. My oven is a gas oven, and it really cooks much faster, so I usually turn my oven on 425. This takes about 15 to 20 minutes to roast, and I usually toss it once halfway through. So my oven is already heated, and what's going to happen with the corn, if you've never roasted corn before, is it caramelizes. It actually will shrink, and it'll get caramelized, and it gets super, super sweet, almost like candy. So what I do typically after the corn is roasted is I will put it back in this bowl with all the other ingredients, and this is where the vinaigrette comes in, and there's only 3 other ingredients to do that with. One is you take a tablespoon of vinegar, red wine vinegar, and you add that to the bowl. I have a tablespoon here of, this is actually a sweet onion. The recipe calls for shallot, but I did not have shallot today, and either one works perfectly fine. So I've got the tablespoon there of the sweet onion, and then it calls for a 1/4 cup of basil. And so I took basil right out of my garden and I chopped it up, and I'm going to add that. It is that simple. You would think that with a recipe this simple, you know, what's the big deal about it? But I promise you, between the sweetness of the corn and this slight little vinaigrette dressing that you're putting on it, it's wonderful. So when it comes out of the oven, I let it cool for just maybe 2 minutes or so, and I try to refrain from eating the corn right off the pan. But what I do is just I add it right back into that bowl, add a lid to the bowl, toss it around, and I actually store it in the refrigerator. I will tell you that the recipe says that it's only good to refrigerate overnight for 1 day. I would argue with that. I keep it in the house for a week, and I will take it by the, couple of major big tablespoons like this and throw it in my salad, and it's delicious. So that is the first simple recipe, and the next one's even easier. So just bear with me here as I switch pans. So not everybody likes beets, but beets are actually a very good vegetable for you. It's packed with good vitamins and minerals, and it's also a great source of potassium. So I will warn that anybody that has any type of heart disease, they usually should check with their doctor to make sure they're not getting too much potassium. I know my father has some heart issues, and he has to be careful how many he eats because he does love beets. So this recipe to roast beets, I've already washed these beets, and all I'm going to do is cut off the ends to make them flat so that when I put them in the oven, they don't roll around on the pan. And you see that's all I've done, and I have a pan in front of me, and I'm going to line this with 3 beets. If the beets are different sizes, I tend to put the smallest beet in the center just so that they cook evenly. And that's the smallest beet, so that's going in the center. And then lastly, I usually do about 3 beets for myself. If I make too many at one time, I can't eat them fast enough because I live alone, and they will actually start to go bad. But I can usually keep them in my refrigerator for almost a week, and I do cut these up after they're roasted and toss them in salads. So now this is the great part. This is how easy it is. You go to your grocery store, get some organic beets, go to the farmer's market, wherever you get your beets. You do just like I did. You wash them up, you cut off the ends, and then the next thing you're going to do, is I actually put olive oil, this is EVOO, in a food grade sprayer. I get them at one of the Kitchen Capers or one of those stores. And then all you're going to do is you're going to squirt the top, or you can even drip oil right out of the olive oil jar onto the top of the beets. That helps later with ease in peeling the skins off. The skins will actually come right off. There's very little thing that you have to do. And then all I do is form a tent. So I roll the foil over like this, and I seal the ends. It's that easy. I put it on a small cookie sheet, and I put that in the oven for 400 degrees, and typically leave it in there anywhere from 60 minutes to 90 minutes, depending on the size of the beets. The size of these beets will probably take somewhere in between 75 minutes. What I typically do is I'll just take a knife, a regular steak knife or something like that, and I will poke it in the center of the beet while it's in the oven at about 60 minutes. And if that knife goes through fairly smoothly, you don't want them mushy or too soft, but enough to go through it pretty easily, then the beets are done. Take them out. You can put them on your countertop, let them cool, and then you can just use your finger to remove the skin and a knife. Warning that they are very messy. You will have red, purple dye all over you, so make sure that you're close to a sink to wash your hands. So one thing I did forget, and I apologize with this, you do use salt and pepper to taste. The recipe calls for a teaspoon of salt for the corn, but if that's too much for you, just to your taste, and also fresh ground pepper. So that's the other thing that I would be adding to this dressing. And the corn is so sweet, you really don't need that much anyway. So that's it for this evening. I'm going to go ahead and put this pan of corn in the oven first, because this only takes 20 minutes at the most to make, and this is how I prep things in one day. And then the beets will automatically be ready. So as soon as this comes out of the oven, I just lower the heat, throw the beets in, and then in another 60 to 75 minutes, I can go off and do whatever I want, multitask. And at the end, I have 2 vegetables ready to eat as sides or toss in salads for the week. So I hope that you enjoy these recipes, and I will actually be putting a post out of what they look like when they're done. So thanks for joining me. Arrivederci.